Introduction. To the outside world, Anaya had the perfect life. She was beautiful, educated, and lived in a charming two-story house in a peaceful neighborhood. Her Instagram feed looked like a magazine spread. Pictures of smiling dinners, romantic vacations, and cozy Sunday mornings with coffee in hand, and her husband, Aman, by her side. They had been married for 5 years, and to everyone around them, they were the definition of relationship goals. Anaya believed in love. Not just any love, but the kind that makes your heart race when you hear their name. The kind of love that makes you feel safe and seen. Aman had been that for her. Supportive, charismatic, attentive. He knew how to make her laugh on her worst days and hold her in complete silence when the words just wouldn't come. He was her best friend, her partner, her home. But what no one saw, what even she hadn't noticed at first, were the tiny cracks forming beneath the surface. The way his eyes sometimes looked through her instead of at her. The way his phone seemed to never leave his side. The small shifts in his behavior that were too subtle to name, but heavy enough to feel. Still, she brushed those thoughts away. Everyone had off days, didn't they? After all, marriages weren't fairy tales. They took work, compromise, understanding. And hadn't Aman always been there when it mattered? The birthdays, the anniversaries, the job promotions, he never missed a single one. Yet, deep down, something didn't feel quite right. The emotional weight of uncertainty is a quiet, suffocating thing. It creeps into the spaces between conversations, into the stillness of the night, and begins to plant seeds of doubt. Anaya began to feel it, the silence growing louder, the distance becoming more noticeable. But she kept telling herself it was just a phase, a busy season at work, a rough patch they would move past like they always had. She didn't know that a single moment, just one accidental discovery, would shatter the illusion she had built around her life. That her perfect marriage was built on a secret so painful, it would not only challenge her trust in Aman, but also force her to confront everything she believed about love, loyalty, and herself. This isn't a story about a marriage. It's a story about what happens when truth breaks through the surface, and how one woman's world is turned upside down by a discovery she never saw coming. Background of the marriage. Anaya met Aman on a rainy evening at a bookstore tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. She was browsing the psychology section, and he was looking for a novel his sister had recommended. Their hands reached for the same book, and when their eyes met, something clicked. It was the kind of moment that feels written, like fate had pulled two people together, without warning. Their first conversation lasted 3 hours. They sat in a nearby cafe, sipping chai and talking about everything from favorite childhood memories to life goals. He was effortlessly charming, with a thoughtful way of speaking and a smile that made her feel seen. Anaya, always cautious with her heart, felt something unfamiliar: ease. From that day on, they were inseparable. Late-night drives filled with laughter, long conversations about dreams and fears, and quiet evenings spent doing absolutely nothing together. It was easy with Aman. There were no games, no doubts. He respected her independence, celebrated her ambitions, and made her feel like she was the only woman in the world. Their families adored the match. Her mother often said, "He treats you like a queen," and Aman would always respond with a smile, "Because she is one." Within a year, they were engaged. The wedding was a beautiful blend of tradition and intimacy, just the way Anaya had imagined it. The early years of marriage were blissful. They built a home together, filled with love and laughter. Sunday mornings were sacred. Pancakes, newspapers, and soft music playing in the background. They made time for each other, no matter how busy life got. When Anaya started her own design studio, Aman was her biggest cheerleader, showing up with coffee and encouraging words during her late nights. They traveled, they grew, and most importantly, they trusted each other. Aman had never given her a reason to doubt him. He listened without judgment, apologized without ego, and loved her with consistency. And Anaya, in return, gave her heart completely. There was comfort in the way he held her, in the quiet moments they shared, in the life they were building together, one memory at a time. People often asked her what made their relationship so strong, and she would always say, "It's the friendship. We were best friends before anything else." But even the strongest foundations can be shaken when built over hidden truths. And though their story began with warmth and sincerity, something buried beneath the surface was waiting, something that would test everything they had once believed about love and each other. Signs something was off. It didn't happen overnight. The changes were slow, almost invisible at first, like a shadow creeping across the floor as the sun begins to set. Anaya couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something in Aman had shifted. He started coming home a little later than usual. At first, it was easy to explain. Longer meetings, last-minute work calls, traffic. He always had a reason, and none of them sounded unreasonable. But the excuses became more frequent. And the apologies? Less sincere. Aman used to walk through the door and immediately find her with a hug, a kiss on the forehead, and a "How was your day?" Now he'd go straight to the bedroom, distracted and silent, phone in hand. Speaking of his phone, that became the biggest red flag. Once open and left carelessly on the kitchen counter, it was now always face down, always locked, always on him. He had started answering texts with a quick flick of his fingers and a subtle lean away from her view. If she walked in while he was on it, he'd quickly turn it off or switch screens. Anaya tried not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was work. Maybe he was planning a surprise. But that familiar feeling of doubt was starting to whisper louder in her mind. Their conversations began to feel shorter, more transactional. He no longer asked how her day went or stayed up late to brainstorm ideas for her business. The deep talks, the late-night laughs, the playful teasing. It all began to fade. In its place was small talk and silence. Then there were the missed details, the little things he used to never forget. Her favorite flower, the way she liked her tea, the anniversary of her studio launch. Aman had once been the kind of man who'd surprise her with tulips just because he saw them and thought of her. Now, he seemed distant even when sitting right next to her. One evening, while folding laundry, Anaya found a receipt tucked into his jacket pocket, a high-end restaurant she'd never been to, dated the night he claimed to be working late. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, she placed the receipt back where she found it and sat with the storm brewing quietly inside her. It wasn't just one thing, it was everything. The accumulation of subtle shifts, of broken patterns, of the growing silence between them, a gut feeling she could no longer ignore. Something wasn't right. And for the first time in 5 years of marriage, Anaya felt like a stranger in her own story. The discovery begins. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when it happened, one of those rare, peaceful days when the world outside seemed to move a little slower. Aman had stepped out for a quick meeting, and Anaya was left alone at home. She was cleaning, half distracted by a podcast playing in the background, when she decided to tackle the one place she rarely ever touched, Aman's home office. It wasn't off limits, but it was his space, and she had always respected that. But today, something tugged at her, curiosity, instinct, maybe even desperation. As she dusted off the shelves and straightened a few scattered papers, her eyes fell on a drawer. Locked. Odd. It had never been before. That drawer used to hold spare cables, notebooks, and old bills. What needed locking now? She paused, heart already racing, and remembered that Aman had once casually mentioned that all his locks used the same code, his mother's birth date. Hands trembling, she entered the numbers. Click. The drawer slid open. Inside were a few files, a passport, and a small black leather notebook. Neat, unassuming. But tucked between the pages was something that didn't belong, an envelope. Her name wasn't on it. There was no address. Just a folded sheet of paper, a printout of an email. She hesitated, then unfolded it. What she read knocked the breath out of her lungs. It was a message from a woman named Sana. Short, direct, intimate in a way that no stranger should ever speak to a married man. I've been thinking about you all week. I can't stop. Last Friday? I can't forget it. We need to talk. You said she's been suspicious. Be careful." Anaya stood frozen, eyes scanning the words over and over again, as if somehow they might change. Her knees felt weak. The room spun. That date, last Friday, was the night he said he was working late. The same night she had found the restaurant receipt. The puzzle pieces crashed into place, and the picture they formed was something she never wanted to see. She sat down on the floor, paper still in her hand, her chest tight with disbelief. 1,000 thoughts flooded her mind: denial, rage, heartbreak, and a terrifying question she couldn't shake. How long had this been going on? This wasn't just a clue, it was confirmation. And in that single moment, her perfect life unraveled. Every memory, every promise, every soft-spoken "I love you" suddenly felt like a lie. She wanted to scream, cry, run, but all she could do was sit there in silence, holding the proof that her marriage, as she knew it, was no longer real. Investigation and shock. Anaya didn't confront him right away, not because she wasn't furious, but because she needed to know the full truth. She wasn't going to fall apart over a single email. She needed to understand the depth of the betrayal, the how long, the how far, the how could he. So, she began digging. That night, she waited until Aman was asleep, his phone resting quietly on the nightstand. She had watched him unlock it 1,000 times, casually, without a second thought. Her fingers moved slowly, carefully mimicking the pattern she had memorized without ever meaning to. Access granted. What followed felt like a slow-motion car crash. There were messages, dozens of them, hidden in a folder under a fake name, as if that would make them invisible. Flirty, secretive, emotional. Photos, meetups, even shared jokes. Private pieces of a life she had never been part of. But it wasn't just Sana. There were others, different names, different timelines, one from 2 years ago, another that seemed to overlap with a vacation they had taken together. Texts that suggested this wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was a pattern, a double life crafted with precision and cowardice, one version of Aman for her, and another for the world she never saw. The shock was a physical thing. Her stomach churned, her hands shook. She felt like she was watching someone else's life fall apart, not hers. How could the man who once held her through panic attacks, who kissed her forehead every morning before leaving for work, be this calculated? She went back to the drawer, this time pulling everything out. Receipts, hotel confirmations, even a second phone tucked into a box labeled Old Tech. The phone turned on without a passcode. More messages, more women. It was too much. This wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was a betrayal of identity. The man she had married didn't exist. Or maybe he did once, but now he was a stranger wearing a mask. Anaya collapsed onto the couch, surrounded by fragments of a truth she never wanted to find. She had thought the email was the end of it, but it was only the door, one she had now opened wide, unable to close again. The weight of it all settled over her like a storm cloud. A mix of heartbreak, fury, humiliation. How had she missed the signs? How had she trusted so blindly? But even through the pain, one thing became crystal clear. She deserved answers. And she wasn't going to ask nicely. Emotional breakdown. The house felt colder now, every wall echoing with memories that suddenly felt fake. Anaya sat alone in the dark living room, the glow from Aman's hidden phone still casting a pale light on her lap. The silence around her was deafening, but inside her, a storm was raging. Tears came without warning, heavy, uncontrollable sobs that shook her entire body. It wasn't just sadness, it was grief. Grief for a love she thought was real, for a man she thought she knew, for a life she had spent years building, only to watch it collapse with one discovery after another. She screamed into a pillow to muffle the sound, not wanting the neighbors to hear, not wanting the world to know her marriage was crumbling. The betrayal hit her in waves, first disbelief, then pain, then fury. She would wipe her tears one minute and throw something across the room the next. How could he do this? Her mind raced with questions that had no answers. Was any of it real? The gifts, the late-night talks, the way he used to look at her like she was the only woman in the world? Was all of it an act? And then came the shame. Not because of what he did, but because she had no idea. Because she had defended him to her friends when they raised an eyebrow. Because she had silenced her own intuition again and again, convincing herself she was overthinking. She replayed moments in her mind like film clips, him holding her hand at their wedding, whispering promises during power cuts, surprising her on her birthday with her favorite book. All of it now stained by lies. Her body ached from crying, from carrying the weight of emotions too big to name. She didn't eat that night, didn't sleep. She just sat on the floor, surrounded by receipts, screenshots, and memories that now felt like weapons. By morning, her eyes were swollen, her voice raw, her heart hollow. But beneath all that pain, something else had started to flicker, resolve. Because the worst part wasn't that he cheated. It was that he made her doubt herself. He made her feel small, blind, naive. And that, more than the betrayal, was what she couldn't forgive. Confrontation. Aman walked through the front door just after 6 p.m., loosening his tie like it was any other day. He looked tired, casual, unaware that the air in the house had changed, that something waited for him beyond the silence, something that would burn through everything he thought was still hidden. Anaya was already seated in the living room, his phone and the folded email lying neatly on the coffee table between them. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, but her posture was steady, composed. Too composed. He paused when he saw her. "What's wrong?" he asked, his tone low, cautious. She didn't speak at first. She simply looked at him. Not like a wife looks at her husband, but like a stranger who suddenly sees the truth. "I found the drawer," she said quietly, "and the emails, and the second phone." The blood drained from Aman's face. His mouth opened, then closed again, searching for the right lie. But there were none left. "Annie, listen, I can explain." "Don't," she cut in, her voice sharp and cold. "Don't insult me with that." He stepped forward, hands half raised in a gesture of helplessness. "It wasn't what you think. It just happened. I didn't mean to." She stood now, her calm cracking. "How many, Aman? 2? 3? Or have I been living in a circus while you ran the show behind my back?" "I messed up," he said, his voice strained. I know I did. But it didn't mean anything. None of it meant anything. You're the one I love." Her laugh was bitter. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to look me in the eye and talk about love after this." She motioned toward the evidence scattered on the table. "You broke us, piece by piece, and you kept lying while I was still choosing you every day." His expression twisted with panic. "We can fix this. Please, Annie. We can go to therapy. We can—" "No," she said, voice breaking now. "I might go to therapy. You can go to hell." He tried to reach for her hand, but she stepped back like his touch burned. "I trusted you with everything I had. You looked me in the face and said vows you didn't mean. You made me question my own instincts while you were out living a double life. Annie, I made a mistake." "No, Aman," she snapped, eyes blazing. "You made choices. Again and again. You chose them. You chose secrets. You chose to throw our life away like it was nothing." For a moment, they just stood there, a chasm between them that could never be crossed again. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was final. And then quietly, Anaya said, "You should leave." Aman opened his mouth, but the look on her face told him there was nothing left to say. He turned, grabbed his keys, and walked out. This time without a kiss, without a word, and without a home to come back to. Turning point. The door closed behind Aman with a quiet click that echoed louder than any scream. And just like that, Anaya was alone. Again. But this time, it wasn't the same. The pain hadn't vanished. It still pulsed beneath her skin, raw and real. But in its place, something new began to grow. Clarity. For days, she drifted between numbness and rage, grief, and disbelief. Her world had been turned upside down, yet strangely, the silence now felt honest. At least now, there were no lies hanging in the air, no fake smiles, no half-truths wrapped in sweet words. She spent the week sorting through their life, photos, letters, wedding gifts. Everything once sacred now felt hollow. But instead of drowning in it, she began to let it go, slowly, one piece at a time, like shedding old skin. On the seventh day, she stood in front of a mirror. Her eyes were tired, but there was something fierce behind them. She looked at herself, not as someone broken, not as someone betrayed, but as someone still standing. And that mattered. It was then that she made her choice. She wasn't staying in this story. There would be no dramatic second chances, no slow rebuild of a broken foundation. And as tempting as revenge sounded in the darkest moments, she realized it would only tie her to him longer. He didn't deserve that power. She would walk away, not as a victim, not as someone abandoned, but as someone who chose herself, finally, fully, fearlessly. She called a lawyer the next morning, booked a session with a therapist that afternoon, changed the locks by evening. Then she did something she hadn't done in weeks. She slept. Not because the pain was gone, but because, for the first time, she felt free. Life after the truth. In the weeks that followed, Anaya moved through life like someone learning to breathe again. There were still days when the hurt crept in like a fog, when a certain song, a photo she hadn't yet deleted, or the smell of his cologne in an old sweater would hit her like a wave. But those moments became less frequent, and when they came, she faced them head-on. She didn't pretend to be okay. She didn't fake smiles for the world. Instead, she gave herself permission to feel everything: grief, anger, sadness, even guilt. And in doing so, she slowly began to heal. Her home changed first. She repainted the walls, cleared out old furniture, and rearranged the space to reflect who she was now, not who they had been together. Each change was a quiet rebellion against the past, and a small celebration of her independence. She started journaling again, something she hadn't done in years. Her words spilled out unfiltered, raw, and honest. It became her therapy, her mirror, her release. Through those pages, she rediscovered herself, her strength, her voice, her worth. Work became a sanctuary. She threw herself into her design studio, taking on projects she once hesitated to accept. She networked more, spoke at events, and let her creativity lead. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't shrinking to fit inside someone else's life. She was expanding into her own. She reconnected with friends she'd drifted from, spent long weekends with her sister, and even started taking solo walks through the city. She noticed things she used to miss: the way sunlight filtered through leaves, how strangers smiled when you held the door, the quiet peace of her own company. And slowly, she began to trust herself again. There was no rush to move on or find someone new. Love would come again, maybe. But she no longer needed it to feel whole. She had already found the most important relationship of her life, the one with herself. People often whispered about what happened, as they always do. But Anaya held her head high, not because she was over it, but because she had owned her story. All of it. The love, the betrayal, the pain, and the growth. She didn't let it define her, but she let it shape her into someone wiser, stronger, softer in some places, and sharper in others. Life after the truth wasn't perfect, it was real, and in that truth, she had finally found freedom. Closing message. In the end, the greatest betrayal didn't destroy her, it revealed her. Anaya learned that trust isn't something blindly given, it's something sacred, something earned. And once broken, it carves deep. But from that hollow space, something extraordinary can grow: clarity, courage, and the fierce kind of self-love that doesn't beg to be chosen, it chooses itself. She realized that resilience isn't loud. It's not always a fight or a dramatic comeback. Sometimes, it's the quiet decision to get out of bed, to face the day, to rebuild, Not just a life, but a sense of self that was buried beneath years of compromise and silence. She no longer measured her worth by someone else's ability to love her well. She became her own safe place. Her story wasn't perfect, but it was powerful, because she survived. And then she thrived. So if you've ever been broken by someone you trusted, let this be your reminder. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become next. And sometimes, the greatest love story is the one you write with yourself.